The lone gunshot echoed across the plains as Olivia Collins watched her last shred of hope die with the stagecoach driver who'd promised to take her to safety. The year was 1875, and the unforgiving sun of Arizona Territory beat down upon her tear-streaked face as the man who'd sworn to love her forever, her husband of 2 years, ransacked her luggage, pocketed her savings, and left her alone in the dust with nothing but her wedding ring and shattered dreams. "You were always too trusting, Livy," he'd sneered before mounting his horse and disappearing into the horizon, leaving her with the body of the poor driver who had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. 3 months later, the memory still haunted Olivia as she stepped off the train in the small town of Redemption Creek. The settlement had sprung up around a silver mining operation and cattle trade, growing from a few weathered buildings to a bustling hub of commerce. For Olivia, it represented her last chance. Her cousin had written promising work at the town's only hotel, and with nowhere else to turn, she had spent her last coins on the train fare. "Miss, you need help with that bag," a deep voice called from behind her. Olivia clutched her small valise tighter, her eyes narrowing with distrust. "I can manage, thank you," she replied coldly, not bothering to turn around. The train platform was busy with travelers, merchants, and workers loading crates. The clatter of hooves on packed dirt and the shouts of the station master created a cacophony that overwhelmed her senses after the relative quiet of the journey. She stepped away quickly, nearly stumbling as her boot caught on the edge of a loose board. A strong hand steadied her elbow. "Careful there, madam." This time she turned, coming face to face with a tall man whose features were partially obscured by the shadow of his worn leather hat. His eyes, however, were startlingly clear, the deep blue of a high mountain lake. He wasn't smiling, and for that she was grateful. She couldn't bear the false promises that came with men's smiles. "I don't need assistance," she said sharply, pulling away. "My cousin is meeting me." The man nodded once and stepped back, respecting her space. "Name's Quincy. I run the livery stable in town." "Your cousin wouldn't happen to be Martha, would it?" Olivia felt her stomach drop. "Yes, Martha Evans. Do you know her?" Something flickered in his eyes. "You might want to come with me, miss." "Mrs. Collins," she corrected automatically, though the title felt hollow now. "Olivia Collins." "Mrs. Collins," he amended. "Martha took ill 2 weeks ago, fever. She's recovering at Doc Sullivan's place, but she ain't in any condition to be meeting trains." Olivia swayed slightly, the last of her carefully laid plans crumbling. "I see. I can take you to her if you'd like." He didn't reach for her bag again, keeping a respectful distance. She studied him warily. Clean-shaven, his shirt and jeans worn but neat. No wedding band. But then her husband had worn his right up until the day he'd betrayed her, so that meant nothing. His boots were scuffed and caked with the evidence of hard work, and his hands bore the calluses of a man who earned his living honestly. "Why would you help me?" she asked bluntly. Quincy's expression remained steady. "Your cousin's been worried sick about you coming and her not being able to meet you. Asked around town if someone could keep an eye out. I was heading to the station anyway to pick up some supplies. It could be a lie. Everything could be a lie, but she had nowhere else to go." "Very well, Mr. Quincy," she conceded, her voice tight. "I would appreciate being taken to my cousin." The walk through Redemption Creek was mercifully short. The town consisted of one main street with various establishments branching off to either side. A general store, a saloon, the livery stable Kyle had mentioned, a small church, and at the far end, a modest white building with a sign that read Dr. Sullivan, Physician. Martha was indeed there, her normally robust face pale and drawn against the white pillowcase. She burst into tears at the sight of Olivia. "Oh, my dear girl, I'm so sorry," she cried. "I meant to have everything ready for you, a room at the hotel, maybe even a position, but this wretched fever." Olivia sat beside her, genuine concern momentarily displacing her own troubles. "Don't fret about me, I'm just glad you're recovering." "Kyle," Martha addressed the cowboy who had stepped back near the doorway, "you'll help her get settled at the boarding house, won't you? Tell Mrs. Patterson to put it on my account." "No need for that," Kyle said. "I've got the wagon outside. Mrs. Collins can stay at my mother's place until we sort things out. Plenty of room since my brothers moved out west." Olivia stiffened. "That's not necessary. I can find lodging on my own." Martha reached for her hand. "Liv, please. Kyle's mother is the most respectable widow in town. Their home is the old Quincy ranch house just outside of town. You'd be safer there than at Patterson's, where all manner of traveling salesmen come and go." Kyle cleared his throat. "My mother would welcome the company. She's been alone since my father passed 3 years ago, except when I visit. I live above the stables in town." Olivia looked between them, feeling cornered. She had no money for lodging, and the idea of imposing on Martha while she was ill was unthinkable. "Just until Martha's well," Kyle added, as if sensing her resistance. "No strings attached, no strings attached." If only that were ever true when it came to accepting help from a man, but she nodded stiffly, having no other choice. "Very well. Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Quincy." The ride to the Quincy ranch was silent. Olivia sat as far from Kyle on the wagon seat as physically possible, her back rigid, her gaze fixed on the distant mountains. The landscape around Redemption Creek was beautiful in a harsh, uncompromising way, much like life itself, she thought bitterly. Catherine Quincy turned out to be a slender woman with silver-streaked hair and the same startling blue eyes as her son. She welcomed Olivia without question, showing her to a clean, simple room that overlooked a small garden. "I heard about your situation from Martha," Catherine said kindly. "Not the details, mind you, but enough to understand you've had a difficult journey. You'll be safe here, my dear." Safety. Such a simple concept that now seemed as elusive as happiness. "Thank you," Olivia managed. "I won't impose for long. As soon as Martha is well, I'll find work in town." Catherine patted her hand. "No rush. In the meantime, you're welcome to help me with the garden if you've a mind to. Always too much work for these old bones." That night, alone in the unfamiliar bed, Olivia finally allowed herself to weep. She cried for the girl she had been trusting and full of hope. She cried for the life she'd thought she was building with a man who had only seen her as a means to an end. And she cried because, despite everything, a tiny part of her still yearned to believe that goodness existed in the world. The days fell into a pattern. Mornings in Catherine's garden, afternoons helping with household chores, and occasional visits to Martha, who was recovering slowly. Kyle Quincy appeared every few days, usually with supplies or to check on repairs around the ranch house. He never lingered, never imposed, and never, ever smiled at her directly. She noticed it one afternoon as she sat on the porch shelling peas. He was fixing a loose board on the steps, and Catherine had brought him lemonade, saying something that made him laugh. His entire face transformed, years falling away, his eyes crinkling at the corners. But when he glanced up and saw Olivia watching, the smile vanished, replaced by his usual careful, neutral expression. It puzzled her until she realized he was deliberately guarding his smiles around her. As if he somehow knew that the easy charm most men wielded so carelessly was precisely what she couldn't bear to see. The realization unsettled her deeply. 2 weeks into her stay, a summer storm rolled in, the kind that turned the sky an ominous green-gray before unleashing its fury. Olivia had been alone at the house, Catherine having gone to a church meeting in town. The rain came suddenly, pounding against the windows with such force she feared they might shatter. She was struggling to close the shutters against the wind when Kyle appeared, drenched and breathing hard. "Where's my mother?" he shouted over the storm. "In town. She left hours ago," he cursed under his breath. "The creek's rising. Road to town might be washed out soon. Help me secure the livestock." Without waiting for her response, he turned and ran toward the small barn. Olivia hesitated only a moment before grabbing Catherine's oilcloth coat from the hook and following him into the deluge. The next hour passed in a blur of driving rain, frightened animals, and shouted instructions. They managed to get the 2 milk cows and Catherine's prized mare into the barn, along with the chickens that hadn't been too stubborn to catch. By the time they stumbled back to the house, Olivia was soaked to the skin despite the coat, her hands raw and muddy. Kyle built up the fire while she changed into dry clothes. When she returned to the main room, he had shed his sodden shirt and was wearing one of his old ones that had been left in a chest. His hair was still damp, curling slightly at the nape of his neck. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Couldn't have managed that alone." Olivia nodded, oddly breathless. "Will Catherine be all right in town? She'll stay with friends. She's got sense enough not to try the road in this weather." He looked at her hands and frowned. "You're hurt." She glanced down, noticing the angry red scratches from the chicken wire. "It's nothing. Let me see." Before she could protest, he had crossed to her and taken her hands in his. His touch was gentle as he examined the cuts, turning her palms up to the firelight. "Sit down," he instructed, moving to retrieve a small kit from a cabinet. "Mother keeps medicine in here somewhere." "I can tend to it myself," Olivia said, but her voice lacked its usual sharp edge. He returned with a jar of salve and clean cloth. "Humor me." She allowed him to clean the scratches, his large hands surprisingly deft. Neither spoke as he worked, the only sounds the crackling fire and the steady drumming of rain on the roof. When he finished, his fingers lingered on her wrist for just a moment, and she felt the strangest fluttering sensation in her chest. "Thank you," she said, withdrawing her hands a bit too quickly. He nodded and moved away, putting deliberate distance between them. "You should get some rest, Mrs. Collins. Storm might last all night." "Olivia," she said suddenly. "My name is Olivia." He looked up, clearly surprised. "Olivia," he repeated, and something in the way he said it made her face warm. "Good night then, Olivia." "Good night, Kyle." It was the first time she had used his given name, and the significance wasn't lost on either of them. As she retreated to her room, Olivia realized with a start that for the first time in months, she had forgotten to be afraid. The storm marked a turning point. Though she maintained her careful distance, Olivia found herself watching Kyle more closely. The way he treated his mother with unfailing respect, how he would remove his hat when speaking to any woman, the gentleness in his hands when tending to injured animals. The way he always kept his word. One afternoon, she overheard a conversation between Kyle and a man who had come to buy a horse. "That bay mare ain't right for you," Kyle was saying. "She's got a bad tendon in her left foreleg. Won't be good for the kind of riding you described." The customer sounded irritated. "Seems fine to me. I'm willing to pay your asking price. And I'm not willing to sell you a horse that'll go lame within a month. Got a gelding that'd suit you better. He's older, so I'll take 20 less than what we discussed." After the man left with the gelding, Olivia stepped out from where she'd been watering Catherine's roses. "You could have made more money," she observed. Kyle shrugged, not startled by her presence. "Wouldn't have been right." "Most men wouldn't care about right. They'd care about profit." His eyes met hers directly. "I'm not most men, Olivia," she believed him. That was the terrifying part. Martha had fully recovered by now, but somehow Olivia remained at the Quincy ranch. She had taken over much of the household management, giving Catherine a much-needed rest. In return, Catherine taught her to make preserves from the garden's bounty and shared stories of raising 3 boys in the untamed territory. Kyle was always the serious one, she told Olivia as they worked side by side, peeling peaches for canning. Even as a boy. His father used to say he was born with an old soul. Olivia glanced out the window where Kyle was visible in the distance, mending a fence. He rarely smiles, Catherine's hand stilled. He smiles plenty, just not when he thinks you're looking. At Olivia's confused expression, she added softly, "My son notices things, Olivia. He's noticed how you flinch when men grin too widely or make grand gestures. He's guarding his expressions around you, trying not to frighten you away." Warmth bloomed in Olivia's chest, followed immediately by cold fear. She wasn't ready for this, for the implications of a man who would adjust his very countenance to protect her comfort. "I should be moving to town soon," she said abruptly. "Martha says there's work at the hotel now." Catherine sighed. "Of course, if that's what you wish. But remember, not every hand extended to you holds a knife behind its back." That night, Olivia couldn't sleep. Catherine's words kept echoing in her mind. Finally, she rose and wrapped a shawl around her nightdress, intending to get a glass of water from the kitchen. As she passed through the main room, she noticed the front door was ajar, and through it, she could see Kyle sitting on the porch steps, his back to her. She hesitated, then pushed the door open further. "Couldn't sleep either," he turned, clearly surprised. "Olivia, no, just thinking." She stepped out onto the porch, keeping the shawl tight around her shoulders. The night was cool, the sky ablaze with stars. "May I join you?" He nodded, shifting to make room on the step. They sat in silence for a while, the quiet broken only by the chirping of crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl. "I was married," she said finally, the words rushing out before she could reconsider. "For 2 years. His name was James." Kyle remained perfectly still beside her, as if afraid any movement might stop her words. "He wasn't who I thought he was," she continued, staring straight ahead. He took everything, not just my savings, but my trust, my ability to believe in kindness. He killed a man right in front of me and left me with nothing but the clothes on my back. Kyle's voice was low. "Where is he now?" "I don't know. California, perhaps. He always talked about going west." She swallowed hard. "I keep waiting for the shame to fade, but it doesn't. I was so foolish." "No," Kyle said with unexpected fierceness. "Being betrayed doesn't make you foolish. It makes him a villain." She turned to look at him then, finding his face illuminated by the silver moonlight. His eyes held no pity, only a steady understanding that somehow hurt worse than condemnation would have. "Why are you so kind to me?" she whispered. Kyle looked down at his hands, resting on his knees. "Because you deserve kindness, Olivia, because everyone does." He paused. "And because from the moment I saw you on that train platform, looking like you were ready to fight the whole world alone, I couldn't look away." The honesty in his voice terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. She stood abruptly. "I should go back inside." He didn't try to stop her, didn't reach for her, just nodded once. "Good night, Olivia." She was halfway through the door when she turned back. "Kyle, thank you for never smiling at me the way other men do, for understanding without my having to explain." A small, careful smile touched his lips, then not the broad, false charm her husband had wielded like a weapon, but something genuine and restrained. "You're welcome." Autumn came to Redemption Creek in a blaze of gold and crimson. Olivia still hadn't moved to town, finding endless reasons to delay. The harvest needed tending. Catherine had taken a fall and needed extra help. The hotel position had been filled, but another would surely open soon. Excuses, all of them. The truth was, she had found something at the Quincy ranch she had never expected to find again. Peace. One crisp October morning, Catherine announced she was going to visit her sister in the neighboring town for a few days. "You'll be all right here with Kyle checking in on you, won't you?" she asked innocently, though there was a knowing gleam in her eye that made Olivia blush. "Of course," she replied. "I can manage the house." The first day alone passed uneventfully. Kyle came by to tend to the livestock, staying only long enough to chop some firewood before returning to the livery stable in town. The second day brought an unexpected complication. Olivia was gathering the last of the season's apples from the small orchard when she heard horses approaching. 3 riders came into view, rough-looking men whose appearance immediately set her on edge. They weren't locals. She had been in Redemption Creek long enough now to recognize most residents. "Well, what have we here?" the leader called, reining in his horse. "All alone, madam." Olivia set down her basket slowly. "This is private property. The owner will be back shortly." The men exchanged glances. "We're just looking for directions," the leader said, but his smile sent ice down Olivia's spine. It was the same smile James had worn when lying too broad, too practiced. "Our friend was supposed to meet us in Redemption Creek. Name of Collins, James Collins." "You wouldn't happen to know him?" The blood drained from her face. "I'm afraid not," she lied, her voice remarkably steady despite her racing heart. "The town is 3 miles east. You can't miss it." The leader dismounted, and Olivia took an involuntary step back. "Thing is, we heard James married a pretty little thing in these parts. Been looking for him a while now. Owes us quite a bit of money." "I can't help you," she said, calculating the distance to the house and whether she could reach it before they caught her. The man stepped closer. "You sure about that, Mrs. Collins?" A cold, hard voice cut through the tension. "The lady said she can't help you." Kyle stood at the edge of the orchard, a rifle held casually but purposefully in his hands. Beside him was Sheriff Mills, whom Olivia had met several times in town. "These men bothering you, Miss Olivia?" the sheriff asked, his hand resting on his holster. Relief flooded through her. "They were just leaving, Sheriff." The leader's eyes narrowed as he looked between Olivia and Kyle. "No harm meant," he said finally, backing toward his horse. "Just asking directions." "Then consider yourselves directed," Kyle said coldly. "Redemption Creek's that way. I suggest you pass right through it." The men mounted up, the leader tipping his hat with mock politeness. "Maybe we'll see you around, Mrs. Collins." "I doubt that very much," the sheriff replied. "I've got a wire from Arizona Territory about 3 men matching your descriptions, wanted for robbery and murder. Planning to have a long conversation with you gentlemen in my office." Their expressions changed instantly, hands moving toward weapons, but the sheriff and Kyle were faster. Within moments, the men found themselves staring down the barrels of 2 steadily held guns. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," the sheriff warned. The ensuing confrontation was brief. Outgunned and caught by surprise, the men surrendered with only token resistance. As the sheriff led them away, Kyle rushed to Olivia, who had remained frozen in place. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, setting down his rifle to grasp her shoulders gently. She shook her head. "They knew James. They knew who I was." Kyle's expression darkened. "Sheriff Mills got a wire last week about James Collins. He's wanted in 3 territories now. When these men started asking questions in town about a woman matching your description, we put it together." His hands tightened slightly. "I should have been here sooner." "You came when it mattered," she said softly. He searched her face. "They won't be back, and your husband, the law will catch up to him eventually." "He's not my husband," she said with sudden clarity. "Not in any way that matters." That night, sleep eluded her again. The encounter in the orchard had shaken loose something inside her, not fear, as might have been expected, but a strange sense of liberation. James felt distant now, a poisonous chapter closed rather than an open wound. She found Kyle on the porch again, as if he'd been waiting for her. This time, when she sat beside him, she left no space between them. "You've never asked why I stay," she said quietly. "Why I haven't moved to town like I keep saying I will." Kyle looked at her then, his eyes serious in the darkness. "I figured you'd tell me when you were ready. I stay because I feel safe here, not just physically safe." She struggled to find the words. "Safe to remember who I was before, who I might be again." His hand found hers on the rough wood of the porch step, his calloused fingers curling around hers with infinite care. "And who might that be?" Olivia turned to face him fully. "Someone who believes good men exist, someone who might learn to trust again." Kyle's breath caught audibly. "Olivia, you never smile at me," she interrupted. "Not really. Your mother noticed. She told me why." His jaw tightened. "I didn't want to remind you of him, of men who use charm as a weapon." "I know," she whispered, "but I think I'd like to see you smile now." For a long moment, he simply looked at her, his eyes reflecting the starlight. Then, slowly, his lips curved upward, revealing a smile so genuine, so full of restrained hope and tenderness, that Olivia felt something long frozen inside her begin to thaw. "There you are," she murmured, reaching up to touch his cheek. "There you've been all along." When he kissed her, it wasn't the passionate, consuming kiss of romantic tales. It was hesitant, questioning, a kiss that asked permission with every breath. Olivia answered by drawing closer, her hands finding the solid warmth of his shoulders, anchoring herself to him as surely as he had anchored her these past months. "I've been falling in love with you since the moment you wouldn't let me carry your bag," Kyle admitted when they finally broke apart, his forehead resting against hers. "But I would have waited forever, Olivia, however long it took." She smiled then, a real smile that reached her eyes for the first time in longer than she could remember. "You won't have to wait forever, just a little longer until I'm whole again." Kyle's arms tightened around her. "You're already whole, Olivia Collins, wounded maybe, healing definitely, but never broken." In the spring of 1876, Olivia Collins became Olivia Quincy in a simple ceremony in Redemption Creek's white-steepled church. Martha cried happy tears as she adjusted her cousin's veil, and Catherine beamed with pride as her son stood tall and straight, waiting for his bride. When news came 6 months later that James Collins had been captured and hanged for his crimes in California, Olivia felt nothing but a distant relief that justice had been served. The man who had once consumed her thoughts was now merely a fading shadow, powerless against the light of the life she had built. Their first child, a daughter named Hope, arrived the following winter during a snowstorm that kept the doctor from reaching them in time. Kyle, steady as always, helped bring his daughter into the world with the same careful hands that had once tended Olivia's scratched palms. "She has your eyes," Olivia whispered as they gazed down at their newborn, wrapped in a quilt Catherine had made. "And your courage," Kyle replied, his smile his real smile, the one he now shared freely, warming her more than any fire could. As Hope grew, so did the ranch. Kyle's careful management and Olivia's shrewd business sense expanded the Quincy holdings until it became one of the most prosperous in the territory. They added a son 2 years later, then twin girls who kept the entire household in cheerful chaos. Sometimes, visitors to the ranch would comment on how the Quincy's seemed to communicate without words, a glance here, a slight nod there, a shared smile that spoke volumes. Few knew the story behind that silent language, how it had been built word by painful word, trust by hard-earned trust. On their 10th anniversary, Kyle presented Olivia with a silver locket. Inside was a tiny, perfect sketch of their family, standing before the ranch house that had become their haven. "What do you see when you look at this?" he asked as they sat on the same porch steps where they had first bridged the chasm between hurt and healing. Olivia studied the miniature portrait, her fingers tracing the delicate silver edges. "I see second chances," she said finally. "I see a woman who learned that while trust can be shattered in an instant, it can also be rebuilt day by day, smile by smile." Kyle's arm curved around her shoulders, drawing her close against the evening chill. "Any regrets?" She looked up at him, at the face that had become as familiar to her as her own reflection, at the smile that now brought only comfort and joy. "Just one," she said, her eyes twinkling. "That I wasted so much time being afraid to smile back." Kyle laughed, the sound echoing across the land that had witnessed their journey from strangers to lovers to partners in every sense. "We had time," he reminded her. "We always had time." As the sun set over Redemption Creek, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Olivia Collins Quincy leaned her head against her husband's shoulder and smiled, not the cautious, guarded smile of her past, but the full, radiant smile of a woman who had found, against all odds, that her betrayed heart was not only capable of love again, but was made stronger for having been broken. The shadows of the past would always be there, but they had long since been outshone by the light of a patient cowboy's unwavering love, and the simple, profound miracle of learning to trust a smile again.